And if I didn't have a million phone calls from my brother, from my boyfriend, from my mom, from my family talking about Ryan, you can't come back.
Yeah.
Donald Trump banned you while you were. I was like, he banned me? He banned me? He doesn't want me back?
Hey there, my name is Santiago and welcome back to my channel. For today's video, I'm debuting a new series that I'm calling Para la Gente. When I was considering what I wanted this chat series to be called, I wasn't really sure. It's pretty hard to come up with a series name, but I just took it back to my roots. I want to make videos for the people, to inform them, to educate them, to just have a good conversation with others and have la gente, mi gente, experience it and take part in it. So through some brainstorming, I came up with this title, Para la Gente, where I'll just be chatting with individuals across the nation to discuss a range of topics. In today's episode, I'm talking with my good friend Ryan, who is a nurse in Tennessee, to discuss COVID-19. I'm really excited to showcase this new series with you, and I really hope that you tune in for all of it, but there will be timestamps down below that you can use to navigate this video. Remember that if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and leave a comment down below and let me know what you think of this conversation and what future chats you'd like to see. So let's get into it. Para la gente. Hey Ryan!
Hi, Nancy.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you? I just got me Starbucks this morning. I'm doing well.
Ooh, what'd you order?
I know, man. I got the it's the white but venti toasted white mocha frappuccino. It's like it's a milkshake basically, but they put some coffee in it so I can call it coffee. But it's mostly a milkshake.
So for those tuning into this video and those maybe unfamiliar with who you are, could you please just introduce yourself and maybe tell me what you do?
Yeah, so my name's Ryan. I live in Tennessee and I am an ICU nurse. I'm a registered nurse and I work in the ICU.
For those maybe a little bit unfamiliar with the ICU, how would you explain that to a kid maybe?
I take care of the really, really sick people.
Obviously right now, because of everything going on, I assume that what you're seeing and from the private conversations that we have had, it's a lot of things concerning with like COVID, right? You're seeing a lot of COVID patients having to take care of those people and really offer that type of healthcare right now.
Yeah, and it's something that I think a lot of nurses were not prepared for. This was not something that any healthcare provider signed up for when we went into medicine. It's probably the last thing I thought would ever happen. I thought we'd have
a global pandemic. You didn't sign up for that?
No, I didn't. I did not. It seems like people expected that I should have expected this coming, but I did not. They're like, didn't you think about this? Like, no, actually, we had a whole class on emergency preparedness, and we didn't cover a pandemic, not once. We talked about mass shootings, all kinds of stuff, and we never once mentioned the word pandemic. I didn't even know what the difference was between an epidemic and a pandemic because that was like going back to my first semester of nursing school. I'd forgotten totally what it was until, of course, the WHO released that it's a pandemic. I'm not too proud to admit that I was like, I don't even know.
I mean, but it's real, you know, like you weren't considering that this is what you would be doing as a nurse. I mean, it's pretty unprecedented.
Yeah, and it's been crazy. Just it's really hard because I had gotten to a point as a nurse where I felt like I had a good knowledge of everything because I work in a medical ICU, so I get to see all kinds of different patients. I see surgery patients, I see cardiovascular patients, I see just regular medical patients like liver patients. Basically any organ system. I've seen problems with it, and I'm somewhat familiar with the pathophysiology and the treatments and the prognosis for all of those things. But it's really scary. And what was really scary at first and what is still really scary now is there's just so much about it we don't understand. I think about it all the time. In 20 years, I'm going to look back at this and say, wow, that's what we should have been doing. We were doing the exact opposite, actually. Or, they're going to say it was this easy. You could have just done this and everybody would have got fixed. And we'll be like, yeah, that was like the last thing on my mind of things to do for that patient. It's hard for me as a nurse because it's hard for me to verbalize and talk to people and really give them an outlet, because when patients come in and their families and they call and they want to know, what have you seen? What's my prognosis? Am I getting out of here? Is that what's going to happen next? And I don't know. I don't have numbers to tell you. I don't have any kind of hope to offer you, I really don't know. I've seen 98-year-olds just come in and need 2 liters of oxygen and just get to go home 2 weeks later. And then I've seen, 22-year-olds come in and die from COVID who, didn't have any huge type of underlying comorbidity before this.
Yeah, I guess to segue off of that, CNN reported that more than 250,000 Americans, that being 250,000 people, have died because of COVID-19. In Tennessee specifically, the state reported yesterday that a record high number of current COVID hospitalizations was almost 2,000 people, which is, again, a record for your state. I mean, how does this make you feel? We had seemed to be getting a handle of it back kind of towards early summer, but I don't know, things are looking a little crazy.
Well, I won't be too political, but I think our government has failed us. Our federal government has really dropped the ball, and I think some state governments have done a very good job of picking up that ball and running with it. For example, in New York and California, as well as Kentucky. Kentucky's done a really good job, I think, comparatively to Tennessee, because we have very similar demographics, and their numbers are so much better than Tennessee's. In my opinion, when the federal government kind of dropped the ball, our state government was like, "Yeah, we ain't picking that up. No, we ain't doing all that." Our state governor never made a mask mandate. He never was closed any businesses down. They really valued the economy a lot, which is fine. We do need an economy to go forward, but it's also very hard to have an economy when there's no people to spend any money.
Obviously not to get too political, you can see it one way or a different way, but there should have been a more sustained and confident leadership just federally.
Yeah.
You don't have someone at the top. How are you supposed to operate down here with less resources? It's just crazy. Like, you tell people to stay home, but how are they going to get their money to keep the economy
Exactly.
going?
And where the federal government failed us, I really feel like Tennessee's leadership failed us. Our governor released a statement where he said county mayors can implement mask mandates, but I'm not going to do that, which to me kind of says I'm not accepting responsibility for this, and I'm just going to pass the buck on to somebody else, so that when something doesn't go right, it's going to go on their shoulders, not mine.
Not my fault. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just really disheartening because I'm sitting here at the hospital having to have these tough conversations with people's families, and having to do this job that I didn't really anticipate having to do, but I still have to do it, and I have to do it to the best of my ability, and I have to do what I believe is right. And it's disheartening that I feel like a lot of our leadership is not able to take those same steps.
And with the people that you're, having to care for, it seems that based off what I've read, there are certain demographics that are more affected by it than others. Has that been your experience as well?
Yeah, Tennessee is one of the top 10 unhealthiest states in the United States. As far as diabetes, cardiovascular health, stroke, we are incredibly unhealthy. I think over 2/3 of our population is considered obese. Those are all big risk factors for COVID. We also have a lot of poor socioeconomic people, like people that just don't have any money. They don't have economic advantages. A lot of places don't have very good health care. They don't have access to health care. And those are really things that COVID kind of breeds off of. So I was expecting Tennessee to have a much more coordinated response from our state government, just because, in addition to this being a deadly pandemic for everyone, lots of Tennesseans personally are at risk. At first, it was a lot of Latinos, mostly because they were essential workers, as well as, Black people. And the white people, I guess, it seems as though they're more socioeconomically advantaged. So they weren't necessarily having to go out to work, because these minorities were having to go back out to work. And it was really sad because a lot of, for example, the Latinos live in these intergenerational homes.
Right.
Where they have grandpa.
I live with mom, live with mi abuelito, mis tías, mis tíos.
Exactly. And community is very important to them, and it's very important to me too. But you can't really say, "Hey, grandpa, you're going to live in the garage for 3 weeks now because we've all got COVID." It just doesn't translate. And that was very hard, because I remember in April we had an entire Latino family, and that was very disheartening for me. And then it also was disheartening for me because I always got those patients. They were like, because I speak Spanish, which I don't mind being able to communicate with them, but it's very, very upsetting when I'm the only one who can communicate with them, and I'm having to listen to the very sad, sad stories and how lonely they are, and having to see how relieved they are that someone is there that can talk to them, which should be the bare minimum.
Yeah.
But it's really sad, that really took a toll on me, from going to these room to room to room of these Latinos, and these, primarily they were Mexican. They were unable to talk to anybody else, hadn't talked to anyone in their language for days, hadn't FaceTimed their family in days, hadn't heard from their family except for, when their daughter brought tortillas in the morning, which they did that every day. And I couldn't eat them, but still, it was just really, really hard for me as a nurse
Yeah.
to have to be that person that was kind of in between everybody.
Yeah, dude. I can't imagine that, but I know that those patients that did have those conversations with you and finally had an interaction where the person, their provider, spoke the same language as them, was able to understand the issues that they're dealing with, just have a freaking conversation with someone, like I'm sure that meant a lot to them.
Yeah, I had no idea how important it was until all of this has started going on and all of the different racial discussions we're having in the country right now. But I've realized that having representation in medicine is very important. It's important to have doctors who look like you. It is important to have nurses who look like you. And it's important to have providers that understand where you're coming from. Because it makes a huge difference in the care you get, and it just makes a huge difference in so many aspects of your healthcare, as well as giving you peace of mind.
So one more question on this topic. Has there been a case or maybe a conversation with the patient, a staff member, or really anyone that's given you some hope, maybe some like positivity despite all this unfortunate experiences and events that you keep seeing?
It's been reassuring that so many family members are incredibly grateful for what we're doing. A lot of times I feel like the community at large does not appreciate what we're doing very much and doesn't recognize how hard our job is. But when people's families come in and they talk to us, and sometimes I'll spend 20 minutes on the phone talking to someone's family, answering questions, and people are incredibly grateful and incredibly just expressive of that gratitude that they have to you. That means a lot to me. I take comments like that to heart, and it encourages me as I go in and work and continue doing what I do.
You badass, you. Well,
I guess, yeah, I guess I am a badass. I don't know.
Excited about this coronavirus vaccine, and not only because it's going to get me back at the dinner table having awkward small talk with my family, but because this vaccine and the way that it works is really cool. Instead of injecting you with like dead pieces of virus, they inject you with RNA from the virus. So the way that this works is that your cells are pretty dumb. They don't know whether the RNA that they have is from humans or from viruses. They just know that they have RNA and they're gonna make a protein. And the protein that they turn this RNA into is the spike protein of coronavirus. Now, alone, this spike protein doesn't really do anything, but when it's on the outside of the virus, it helps that virus find new cells and start making little baby viruses. If your cells take this RNA in and start making this protein, the immune cells show up and they're like, hey, who made this? We should make antibodies and shut this down. And so then you have antibodies.
All right, so for context on that TikTok, there is a new vaccine that's out that is said to be really effective and is probably going to be out for people to get pretty soon. The data that they got from the research showed that it was 95% effective, preventing against mild and severe forms of COVID-19. It is a 2-dose vaccine, which makes me feel a little iffy. But if the claims are as good as they are in practice, this can probably help a lot of people. What are your thoughts? Like, how do you feel about this vaccine? Would it make your job easier? Do you think people are even going to get it? Like, I don't know. There seems to be a lot
I'm going to get it. I am ready. Let's go.
Put it in my arm.
Yes, here it is. I will be first in line for the vaccine at the hospital. I know that a lot of people I work with are very concerned about the vaccine. They're like, oh my gosh, it can come out so fast. How do we not know it's got long-term effect? I don't know. That does concern me slightly. However, in the immediate future, I know my mental health would be so much better if I don't have to worry about catching COVID all the time.
Right.
I didn't have to worry about taking care of these patients. If it's as good as they say it is and it doesn't have a lot of long-term side effects, especially after watching the TikTok that you showed about how it works with your RNA and makes...
Yeah, it's not even the virus.
Yeah, it's amazing to me. That really is hopeful. And I'm ready. Let's go. I'm ready to just, I'd give it to myself if I could. I would just, let's do it. I'm ready. Going on like this for a long time is not sustainable.
I mean, it's just not healthy, right? Like to be thinking, especially I would assume as a nurse, dealing with COVID patients, like, oh crap, like what happens if, I don't know, my PPE isn't actually working today, or like a small mistake.
Yeah, and people don't appreciate the hypervigilance I have at work because I have to think not only about myself, but I have to, before I go into a room, I have to make sure I have everything. There's no one outside sometimes that I can just, hey, can you bring me an IV flush? Can you bring
No.
me a pillow, a blanket, simple stuff. So I have to really go to extreme lengths in my head to prepare to make sure I have everything. And then on top of that, once I get in there, I have to make sure that all my PPE is on appropriately, and I have to make sure that I am following all of the same things I would normally do, but they just become a million times harder and a million times more mentally taxing.
Yeah. How do you feel when there are people out there who say COVID is a hoax? That it doesn't exist, that these hospitals are empty. Are you part of this conspiracy, Ryan? Are you part of this deep state hoax?
Man, I used to be very angry about it. I used to get very upset that people didn't think it was real. And now I just feel really bad for those people. I pity them because to me, to have so much evidence in front of you and not be able to discern what is the truth, wow, that is pitiful. Pitiful in the sense of I wish you had more access to information, and I wish you had more access to an education, and I wish you had better critical thinking skills and a higher level of thinking to be able to discern that this is obviously not a hoax. When I think about people who think this is a hoax and think it is a conspiracy, I feel very sad for them. And I feel very afraid for them because I've had those people as my patients with COVID. And I've heard them say, I wasn't taking it seriously. I didn't think it was real. It's very real. And they'll tell you it's real. A patient told me one time, there's nothing political about this. I mean, I've had family members tell me that COVID isn't real.
Does it hurt?
Yeah, it hurts because I'm sitting up here, sitting with people's dying family members. I'm sitting here watching people talk to their wives for the last time. I'm holding the phone up so that they can talk to their family for the first time in 3 days. And they're pretty much talking to them for the last time because I think once you go on the ventilator, it's like an 80% chance you're going to die. And I'm sitting here doing all this for all these people, and I'm carrying all this home with me, all these really traumatic experiences. I'm taking them home with me. And I'm being so deeply affected by these things. To come home and read a Facebook post of someone that I love and someone that I care about saying that this is not real, that this is all made up, that China invented this virus or whatever, it hurts my feelings a lot. It really makes me think, wow, you guys don't value the contribution I'm making at all. I think there's just a huge lack of empathy across the board these days. And I hear him talking about it all the time, and it's sad.
All right, so we're on to the last topic of this conversation. I think you would agree just as much as me that community is probably one of the most important things, in our lives. Seeing our family, seeing our friends, spending time with them in person, having those interactions. Obviously, with COVID, we've had a social distance and quarantine, and we haven't been able to have those interactions. Being a nurse, I know in the beginning of all this craziness, you were taking major precautions, but even before that, your life was a little crazy when this started.
Yeah, so I used to travel the world back in my old life, my pre-COVID life. No, but I did like to travel, and one of my friends is from Spain. I was going over to Spain to meet her at the beginning of March. I get on my airplane to go to Madrid, and I'm flying over the Atlantic, minding my own business, no Wi-Fi in the air, just, totally empty plane. I was so naive. So I land in Madrid the next morning. It's like 8 a.m. in Madrid. And I turn on my phone. And if I didn't have a million phone calls from my brother, from my boyfriend, from my mom, from my family, talking about, Ryan, you can't come back. Donald Trump banned you while you were. I was like, he banned me? He banned me? He doesn't want me back?
Specifically Ryann Parrish.
Yeah, like what do you mean? I was literally over the Atlantic mid-flight, and Donald Trump goes on the television to say, I'm banning all travel to and from Europe. And I get to Europe, and I was like, well, dang, I'm here now. What am I supposed to do? Is this going to be a 30-day ban? This is really serious. And at first, me and Rebecca, which is my friend that I was there with, we were thinking we may come back early, but we were still planning on staying there a full 10 days. And then the second day I was there, Spain went into an emergency state. And I was like, all right, Rebecca, sitting there on the couch with her yaya, like watching TV, and her yaya's like falling asleep, like to the TV, and I'm like watching it, and he's like, yeah, it's a state of emergency. we're going to be closing the border soon. And I was like, oh, yeah. I was like, we got to go. I was like, this is not okay. I was like, oh my. So I went and woke Rebecca up and I said, Rebecca, I was like, we got to think about leaving. And so we ended up leaving the next day. And then I came back to the US and it was like, everything was still fine in the US aside from the airport, which was a madhouse.
Right.
Nothing had really changed. It took probably another week or two for them to actually start changing things and start at least speaking about the coronavirus.
Well, so the crazy thing is we eventually went into a lockdown. We had to, stay at home. Probably different depending on, the state, but I know here in Las Vegas, like you couldn't go anywhere unless you were going to an job or to the grocery store, but like that was basically it. Having lived that, you would think with cases rising, people would maybe be taking it a little bit more seriously so that we don't have restrictions. I mean, what are you doing? Like, are you still taking precautions? And like, how do you feel about social media and maybe seeing people out there still living their best lives? I understand it. I get it. Should we be doing that?
I think it's probably a good idea to read the room. If you want to take your vacation and you want to do it safely and you want to make yourself feel better, I'm all for it, but do it safely. And I don't really think you should post about it that much on social media.
It's like Kim Kardashian and her.
Yeah, read the room, Kim. Read the room.
How are you dealing with things? What do you do for fun? How are you mitigating the mental health issues that you're probably dealing with?
Well, I started going to therapy. And I am not ashamed to say I love therapy and I hate it. And I think everyone should do it.
Yeah.
I'm always surprised at how many nurses don't go to therapy and how many healthcare providers don't go to therapy. I'm like, you guys really need to go. And I think they're always surprised that I'm so willing to talk about it. But yeah, I'm like, yeah, I'm in therapy all the time.
It's no different than like taking Tylenol for a headache, right? Like
exactly, yeah.
It blows my mind as well.
Especially here, there's such a stigma around it still. It's just a stigma of, you can't handle on your own. And I felt like before COVID, I was a very strong, mentally strong person. I was mentally very resilient. I had gotten through a lot of tough things myself and found meaning inside of those tough things and really navigated things very well. But this is way too much. This is a lot of traumatizing things that nurses and frontline care workers are seeing on a daily basis. I don't think that we're taking it seriously enough for ourselves because there's no way. If I hadn't started going to therapy in June, there's no way I would have gotten through it.
That's where you pick up like bad coping mechanisms. I don't know. I read somewhere like you revert to the way you coped as a child.
Exactly. And I was a very, very dramatic, angry little kid. And so
crazy little redhead.
I was just so like dramatic and I would just have outbursts. I was getting not really bad, but I was starting to notice that I was angry all the time. For example, at the start of COVID, we had one mouse in the house, and I lost it. I was just angry for 3 days about one stupid mouse. And in the past, I would have just been like, okay, well, let's just get some traps.
Yeah, this like little thing.
Like, having a mouse is part of having a house. It is what it is.
It happens.
Exactly, but it was just the end of the world. And that was when I realized that I needed to get help because that's something that should not affect me that much. But it was just because I wasn't dealing well with the stuff that was happening to me at work. All of a sudden, all my social outlets and all my relief was gone. And then to have a huge increase in the amount of traumatic things I was seeing was really difficult. And I had to find ways to take care of myself. Part of that was going to therapy. Part of it was getting really good with my boundaries. That's important. If I'm too anxious, if going to somewhere makes me too anxious and it makes where I'm anxious about it 2 or 3 days ahead of time, I just won't go. I'm really just taking care of myself first. I used to work like 4 or 5 days a week on the weeks that I worked, and I don't do that anymore. There's things that are more important than that right now to me.
Final question for you. Where do you see things going from here? Like, what does a post-COVID-19 world look like, where we have things under control, where people are getting vaccinated, where we're not worried about it? What does it look like for you?
I hope our society is more empathetic. I hope that what comes out of this is that we're more understanding and we're more cohesive. The polarization is not helpful. I don't agree with it, and I don't think it does very much for anybody. And I think that the sense of like being one America and really being able to empathize with your neighbor is something that I hope comes out of this. My second hope is I hope I'm more grateful. I hope I'm more appreciative. I hope that every day I remember that nothing is permanent and at any moment it could all change.
Yeah.
And be gone. And I hope that every day I live in such a way that shows I'm grateful that I have everything I have and that I've had everything I had up to that time.
Well, yeah, I think that's beautiful, and I hope that you find that. Yeah, I hope you find it. All right. Is there anything that I didn't get a chance to talk about or ask you that you'd like to say before we close out?
Wear your fucking mask. If you're at the drive-thru, wear your mask.
When you're ordering that McDonald's, wear
your mask. That's all.
All right.
Wash your hands too, but that one, that's on you.
Well, Ryan, it was a pleasure talking to you. For all those tuning in, I'm going to try to make these videos once a month, so please check them out. Thank you again for being here, and I'll keep chatting with you.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.